Hello friends, in the series of C Programming, we discussing control structure in C. Till now we discuss different control structure like if else, while loop, do while loop, nested if else, switch case, etc. Now here we are going to discuss for loop. Now there are three types of loops, that is while loop, do while loop and for loop. Now previous last video till now we discussed while loop and do while loop. We also discussed difference between while and do while. Now here in this video we are going to discuss in details what is for loop in C and why we are using C, what is the use to using for loop in details. We are also going to study what is the syntax for the for loop, what is the working of for loop with one example. So let's start. So for loop is nothing but the for loop is mostly we are going to use for avoiding the repetition of statement. That is it is a loop that repetition control structure that allows you to efficiently we can write a loop that needs to execute specific statement or the same block of the code we have to execute certain number of times called as an iteration. Now, if there is a repetition or iteration, then we are going to use the for loop. So, why we use the for loop? Basically, if we have the many statement in the program or block of the statement, same block of the code in our program, and if you want to execute it into the single way, then we are going to use a for loop, and it is very important loop in programming because it's an entry control loop. Now in previous last video we discussed while loop and do while loop. So while loop is also entry control, but do while loop is an exist control loop. So for loop and while loop is nothing but the entry control loop, and it is very helpful for avoiding the repetition of same block of the code. Now let's see, let's understand what is the syntax of the for loop. Syntax of the for loop. Now for is a keyword, and inside this for loop we have to give the round bracket, and inside this we can for loop is divided into the three parts. That is, first is the expression is nothing but the initialization, second part is nothing but the condition, and third part is nothing but the update. Now after this we have to give the curly bracket, and inside this curly bracket you have to write some statements. Now here I written printf %i. So here if I having the number of statement inside this curly bracket or block of this bracket. Now if you have only one statement, there is no need to write this curly bracket, but if you have the multiple statement you have to use this curly bracket. So it is optional for only one statement, but if you have one or more statement, that's multiple statements, you have to use a curly bracket. Now let's understand how this works. Now this for loop is divided into three parts, that is initialization. Now initialization is nothing but the loop that control variable is initialized here. That is, you can initialize one variable here also. So the variable which you can declare previously, you can initialize. Like for example, you can initialize like I is equal to 0 or I is equal to 1. Next part is nothing but the condition. Now it determines the looping should be continue or not. If it is true, then it going to the continue, and it's depend as long as condition is the true, this body of the loop or block of the loop is going to the execute. And after this third part is nothing but the update, or you may refer it as an increment or decrement. That's why it is called as an update. Now this update statement update the loop control variable after this statement in the loops are executed. That is, after this executions of the loop, this update is going to update. That is, it might be increment or it might be decrement. So let's understand the working of for loop in details. So in this diagram you can see this is the initialization part. Now at the first step it going to the initialize. So this is the step which is called as the execute first only and only once. So remember this, initialization is executed at the first step and it can be or it only execute only once. Now after this initialization, the second step is nothing but the condition. Now in this condition is evaluated. Now here we have to check the condition in the form of true or false. Now the if it is true, then the block of this statement is going to the execute. That is loop is executed, and if it get the false, the block of the loop is doesn't execute, it directly terminated. Now after this condition becomes the true, this is the second part of condition. Now after this, if it is true, then only at the third part the control is going to enter into this curly bracket at the third part. That is, these statements are going to execute, and all after execution the all statement at the fourth part it will make the update. That is, it might be increment and decrement. So after the block of the for loop execute, the flow of control jumps to the increment statement, and that is the fourth step of the increment. And after the incremented, again it going to check the condition because it incremented and it's going to the execute or it going to update. So after updation, that is increment, the condition is again now evaluated, and if this condition is the true, then again the control is enter into the block of statement, and the statement is going to execute. After this execution, again it make the increment, and after this incremented, again the check condition is going to check. If this is true, the loop is executed and the process is repeat itself. If it is true, then the statement is going to the execute. Again the incremented, again this condition is the true. Then if it is true, then the statement is executed, and again this incremented, again the new condition is the check, and after that this statement is going to execute, and again the it goes to the next fourth part, that increment. So this loop is repeated itself until this condition is not becomes the false. Once the condition becomes the false, the for loop is going to the terminated. So this for loop is repeated. This loop is going to the executor repeat itself until this condition is not the form. So that is the working of the for loop. Now let's understand this working with the flow chart. Now at the first level it initialize and it only execute only once. Now at the second part the condition is going to check. That is, condition part is evaluated. If it is true, then the control goes to the for loop body, and if it is false, it get terminated. Now after this control goes to the for loop, if it is true, it will going to execute for loop blocks, and next it make update or incremented. So after the flow of control jumps to the increment statement, and after if this updation or incremented, again this test or the condition is going to evaluated. If this is condition is the true, then the block of this for loop is going to execute. Again this update, again this test is condition so low. So this loop is repeated itself, but only the initialization part is executed only once, and this part is not inside this loop, but this loop is repeated itself. Now after this condition is the false, then this loop is going to terminate it. So for loop is repeated after becomes the false. Now it with one example. Now here I am going to print number from 1 to 5. Now here I included stdio.h. Inside this main I declare one variable, that is I, and I use the for loop. So for loop is divided in three parts. Initialization part I is equal to here 1. Now the condition part I less than equal to 5, I plus plus. and inside this block of statement I return printf %d and I. Now here the working of the for loop, it initializes only once, that is I is initialized to 1, that is into the memory we can assign the value of I is equal to 1. Now at the second part it going to check this condition I less than or equal to 5. If it is true, then it enter into this block of statement and it print %di. So on the screen it print 1. Now after this printing or executing the statement, the control make the updation, that is now here I becomes 2. Now after this 2, it again check this condition. Now again this condition is the true, then it will print 2 on the screen. Now again it incremented to 3, it will check the condition 3 less than or equal to 5, then it is again true, then it will print 3. Now after the printing 3, it will again incremental 4 and this loop is going to the repeated itself till 5. Now once it less than or equal to 5, it printed 5 and then updated it to the 6. Now once it updated to 6, it again check this condition. Now this condition becomes a false and for loop get terminated here. So this is the working of the for loop. Now let's execute this program. This is the declaration of I. This is the for loop. I is equal to 1. This is the initialization part. This is the condition part. I less than or equal to 5. I plus plus. Now let's run this program. So here you will get the number 1 to 5. So we can print the number from 1 to 5 by the for loop. Thank you.